I liked Star Trek Voyager, but as I've said before, it was a show that never truly lived up to its full potential, and from a creative standpoint, it always felt like it was stuck in third gear, never truly taking risks, and instead focusing on standalone stories rather than on season-long story arcs. Considering the ship was stranded far from home, the series should have been about survival in the face of overwhelming odds, and instead it felt more like TNG Light. That's not to say that Voyager wasn't a fun show, it was. The characters were well written, the cast was good, there were some very memorable stories, and because it was mostly standalone, the series was very accessible. You can watch an episode in any season and dive right in without having too much prior knowledge and really enjoy the story. Unfortunately, even in Voyager's series finale called Endgame, the show's conservative approach and unwillingness to take risks was once again on display. Endgame isn't a bad finale, in fact, it's an enjoyable enough two-part conclusion, and it's certainly got a lot of cinematic moments and big action sequences, but the story is very safe. Voyager seriously overdid the Borg, and once again they're thrown in here as the villains of the story. In addition, the episode borrows time travel concepts from other episodes, which largely executed them better. I'm referring to episodes like Timeless and Year of Hell. Endgame is also a time travel story, and so you've basically got two storytelling elements that have already been heavily reused on Voyager, the Borg and time travel. But to make matters worse, if you actually analyse the plot beyond the purely superficial level, you'll realise just how poor a finale this actually is. Don't get me wrong, it's heaps better than Enterprise's These Are the Voyages, but in my view, Endgame is a very poor conclusion, and I really don't think that the writers thought this one through. So, allow me to make my case. I think you'll see just how bad this episode really is. Now it's time for a word from our sponsor for this video, Private Internet Access, a VPN to keep you safe and secure online. Sign up today by using the link below. These days, we're seeing more and more geographic restrictions on websites and content, and even some YouTube videos are now being made unavailable in certain countries. That sucks. It's going to get a whole lot worse when the EU copyright directive comes into play. The internet could become heavily fractured worldwide. Private Internet Access is a VPN company that supports free speech and a free and open internet. Private Internet Access allows you to bypass these geo-restrictions and view content regardless of where you are in the world. With just a few clicks, I can change my location to a different country and obtain a new IP address. Now I can see videos and websites that weren't previously available in my country. Furthermore, the software makes me totally anonymous online so that even my own ISP can't see what websites I'm visiting. My browsing history is completely private, and the software keeps no logs of my data. It even blocks malware, ads, and trackers, and is available for mobile and desktop operating systems. Sign up to Private Internet Access today by using my link in the description box below. You'll be helping to support my work, and you'll stay safe and secure online and bypass geo-restrictions. So the episode begins in the distant future, 10 years after Voyager got home. Admiral Catherine Janeway and the crew have moved on with their lives. They're a good deal older now, though they still meet for regular crew reunions. It took 23 years for Voyager to make it back to Earth. Keep that in mind, because it means that there were 16 years that we didn't see. The show had done 7 seasons, that's 7 years in the Delta Quadrant. 7 of 9 didn't make it home. She died sometime during those next 16 years, and Chakotay died sometime after they returned home. Long story short, Admiral Janeway is planning on getting her hands on some very special technology that will allow her to time travel back to, well, the end of the 7th season of Voyager and convince her younger counterpart, Captain Janeway, to take a ride through a Borg transwarp corridor all the way back to Earth. So, they will return to Earth 16 years earlier than they would have done. All of the scenes that take place in the future with the older versions of the crew are completely pointless, as this entire timeline is going to change anyway. None of this will happen, so it's really all just filler. There's a couple of nice scenes between Admiral Janeway and Tuvok. He's got some kind of Vulcan Alzheimer's, which could have been prevented if he'd gotten home earlier. And the acting is great, but considering all of this is going to be undone, does it really matter? I think Timeless did all of this a lot better, probably because Chakotay and Kim were going back in time to stop a catastrophe. The entire crew had been killed, and Voyager had crashed on a planet and was buried in the ice. So it was all very dramatic and moving. But in this episode, Janeway is only going back because a handful of people died. She actually managed to get most of the crew home, and the ship looked to be in very good nick as well. The future timeline looks like a pretty decent place, and everyone has built happy and successful lives for themselves there. Kim has his own command. The Doctor is married and even has a name now. People seem very happy. Okay, Seven and Chakotay died. Tuvok lost his mind. 22 other unnamed crew members perished. These things could have been avoided, and they can certainly be corrected with time travel, but here's the problem with this story. Admiral Janeway's justification for meddling in the timeline is that she's got some guilt for not getting enough of her crew home sooner. Some people died. Okay, but plenty of people died during the 7 years of the show. Lots of unnamed minor crew members perished during their time serving aboard Voyager. So what was Admiral Janeway's justification for not going further back through time to perhaps the first moment when she lost her first crew member? Her helmsman, first officer and doctor, along with a bunch of other people, were killed in the pilot episode, just after arriving in the Delta Quadrant. She could have gone back and prevented Voyager's mission to the Badlands in the first place, or travelled back to the moment when Voyager was about to destroy the Caretaker's array after they arrived in the Delta Quadrant. And maybe, instead, they could have chosen to set some timed explosives to go off just after they used the array to return to the Alpha Quadrant. But of course, we wouldn't have had a show if that had happened. This is the problem with Voyager's writing. At times, it just wasn't very smart or logical. But okay, let's say they got stranded in the Delta Quadrant. Admiral Janeway could have gone back to the first season and said, look, here's the coordinates to the transwarp corridor. It's going to take you about 7 years to get there. Here's some new transphasic torpedoes and armor technology. From now on, you'll be practically invulnerable against every major hostile species you encounter. I'll tell you about all the dangerous alien species to avoid. The Kazon, Malon, Hirosian, Species 8472, the Krenim, the Borg, you name it. Here's all the mistakes you're going to make over the next 7 years. Now you can avoid them. You can avoid unnecessary contact with other species. Just focus on getting to the Borg transwarp hub as fast as you can. That way, you can keep everyone safe. But of course, some might say, well, if Admiral Janeway had gone back too far, some important things wouldn't have happened. She would never have liberated Seven of Nine from the Collective. Seven was a passion project for Janeway, and so she wouldn't have wanted to undo all of her hard work in setting her free. However, crew members were still dying around that time. Plenty of bulkheads and consoles were exploding between seasons 4 and 7, so maybe people will say, well, if she'd gone back too far, B'Elanna Torres and Tom Paris would have never conceived the particular child that they ended up having in the last episode, Morale. Janeway did, after all, know Morale quite well. If she'd gone back too far, it's likely Torres and Paris would have had a different child instead. However, this isn't a great excuse. I mean, surely other crew members on Voyager would have had children during the 16 years that we didn't see. But regardless, by going back and changing the timeline, Admiral Janeway also changed the lives of countless people on Earth without their consent. Bringing one Federation starship back to Earth 16 years earlier would have had a massive impact on history. Keep in mind that Voyager was 23 years in the Delta Quadrant, but the episode begins in the future, 10 years after they got home. That means that Voyager's mission to the Badlands began 33 years ago, and Admiral Janeway is actually changing 26 years of history. Small changes in the past, such as bringing Voyager home earlier, would have led to a chain of new events producing a very different future. She doesn't have the right to do this. Lots of people would have been born over the past 26 years. Now they will not be. And lots of new people would have been born in their place. It's impossible to calculate just how many lives would have been dramatically altered and how historical events would have worked out very differently across the Federation. And also, what about all the good that Voyager would have done in the Delta Quadrant during the 16 years that we didn't see? What about all the alien lives they would have saved, the people they would have rescued? All of that would have been undone. Moreover, by changing the past, to benefit only 3 main crew members and 22 nobodies that we've never seen on screen, Admiral Janeway would have also prevented Naomi Wildman's daughter Sabrina from being born. It's like what I said earlier. With Timeless, the future really was awful. Harry had made an awful mistake and got the entire crew killed. So it was a future that one could justify changing. But the future that Admiral Janeway is from is actually pretty good for everyone there. So her reasons for wanting to change the past seem extremely selfish. Whatever happened to the non-interventionist philosophy of the Prime Directive? Suddenly, she's willing to massively alter history because she's unhappy that she didn't get more of her crew home? Though she's still drawing an arbitrary line in the sand and making it all about the crew members who are going to die after the 7th year in the Delta Quadrant and not all of the crew members who died prior to that. If she's really trying to prevent loss of life, maybe she should have gone back in time and tried to stop the Dominion War from happening. What also takes me out of this episode a little bit is the fact that Admiral Janeway is only concerned with the lives of the regular cast, which is the same people that the audience is concerned with, obviously. We're told that along with 7 of 9 and Chakotay, 22 other crew members are going to die over the coming 16 years. But what about all the crew members who died over the first 7 years that we watched? I mean, Joe Kerry was a semi-regular in the early years of the series. He died only 4 episodes prior to Endgame. She should have gone back in time a month earlier and saved his life and told Captain Janeway about the transwarp corridor then. But of course, the main concern is really with the regular cast. She focuses heavily on 7 and Chakotay dying and also Tuvok becoming ill. That's where my suspension of disbelief is really being challenged. Now, I think Endgame works as a 2-part brainless popcorn episode, but it doesn't make for a very strong series finale. We never see the crew actually reach Earth and receive a warm hero's welcome. Throughout the entire series, we've heard Harry Kim talk about one day seeing his parents again, but we never see this reunion. We never see Tom Paris reunited with his father Admiral Paris or B'Elanna Torres meeting her father. We never see Tuvok reacquainted with his family. There's nothing bittersweet or poignant about this episode. There's no emotional payoff. Just a bland, meh conclusion where you're left going, yeah, it'll do, I guess. The final moment of the episode where Voyager just flies towards Earth is immensely dissatisfying. After 7 years of following this crew home, this is the best we get. Endgame was the best conclusion they could come up with. Because part of the episode involves time travel and also takes place in an alternate future that will now never happen, Endgame feels a bit derivative, like a poor man's All Good Things. Also, the romance between Chakotay and 7 of 9 is completely out of left field, to the point of feeling forced. Even in the end, when the writers and producers could do whatever they wanted, they still kept the series in third gear. Safe, unambitious, and unremarkable.